Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Connecticut's Old State House. My name is Sally Whipple. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Democracy Center at Connecticut's Old State House, and we are really happy to have everybody here for a wonderful conversations along the Freedom Trail with Tammy Denise. She has been doing these every month, usually online, but getting great viewership because she's uncovering a lot of stories that are related to the Freedom Trail and help us understand and explore the trail better. So we're really happy to have you all here in person today to do this. And I just want to call attention to the Old State House itself for a moment. Connecticut's Old State House was a state capital from 1796 until 1883. And it is a beautiful building, and many, many important things happened here. But one of our most important stories is the story of the Amistad, because when the Amistad, the Mende from the Amistad were first tried, they were tried in this room in 1839. So you can imagine Sengbe Pia being in this room. All 4 of the children were in this room, and many of the men were in this room. They were held in a jail that used to be down the road on Pearl Street. They were brought up to the Old State House for the trial, and this room holds many, many stories and emotions and ideas for us to think about. And it is one of the several stories at the Old State House that are really important to the Freedom Trail. And many of you here are representatives of the trail, and your sites are all important because they help us tell a cohesive, important, but sometimes hidden story of Connecticut. So today we are here for a program where we'll be exploring preservation and the Freedom Trail. And again, we're very happy that you're here, and we're also very pleased to have one of our great supporters, Lieutenant Governor Susan Bysowitz, who is going to be doing introductions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sally, thank you so much for what you do. And literally, the Old State House is living history. It is a beautiful place, and I just learned something I didn't know, which is that the Amistad trials were held here. Very interesting. And we have a lot more historical stories and conversation to be had, and it's my job to introduce one of the people who will be speaking today, and his name is Brent Legs, and Brent is, and I'm going to have to put on my glasses for this because with my contacts, I cannot see a thing. Okay, here we go. Brent Legs is the executive director of the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund and senior vice president of the National Trust. Envisioned as a social movement for justice, equity, and reconciliation, the Action Fund is promoting the role of cultural preservation in telling the nation's full history, while also empowering activists, entrepreneurs, artists, and civic leaders to advocate on behalf of African American historic places. A former Harvard University Loeb Fellow and author of Preserving African American Historic Places, which is considered the seminal publication on preserving African American historic sites by the Smithsonian Institution. Brent is a national leader in the U.S. preservation movement and the 2018 recipient of the Robert Stanton National Preservation Award. His passion for elevating the significance of Black culture in American history is visible throughout his work, which elevates the remarkable stories and places that evoke centuries of Black activism, achievement, and community. Over the past decade, he's developed the Northeast African American Historic Places Outreach Program and its theme, The Business of Preservation, to build a regional movement of preservation leaders saving important landmarks in African American history. As the project manager for several national treasure campaigns across the country, he led efforts to create the Birmingham Civil Rights National Monument in Alabama, which President Barack Obama designated in January of 2017. Other campaign successes include the perpetual protection of cultural monuments like Villa Lawaro, the estate of Madam C.J. Walker in Irvington, New York, Joe Frazier's Gym in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Highcliffe Stadium in Paterson, New Jersey, A.G. Gaston Motel in Birmingham, Nina Simone's birthplace in Tryon, North Carolina, John and Alice Coltrane's home in Huntington, New York, and more. Brent has taught at Harvard University, Boston Architectural College, and the University of Maryland. He was senior advisor and adjunct associate professor at the University of Pennsylvania's Center for the Preservation of Civil Rights Sites, and held an adjunct professorship at Columbia University's graduate program in historic preservation. Please welcome Brent Legs. And the fabulous Tammy Denise, who I have the pleasure of working with on the Freedom Trail in Connecticut. You are about to learn a lot, so Miss Tammy, take it away.
Thank you so much, Governor. Greetings, everyone. This is a special event of Conversations at Noon. We are going to be talking to Brent Legs. And before we get started, we'll do our usual housekeeping. For those who are in social media land, please put your questions and comments there. We'll do our best to try to answer them all. And the usual goes like this. August of 1995, the Freedom Trail was created to tell the stories, the Black narratives, and the contributions of the Black community toward Connecticut's history and the making of it, but also toward the nation. It opens a year later, September 1996, and that's why we have Freedom Trail month of September, and we celebrate it throughout all of September. And it opened to 65 towns and 30 sites, and today we are upwards of 70 towns with almost 180 sites. And the goal is to get a site in all 169 municipalities. And so we are looking forward to talking to Mr. Brent Legs, because he is going to help us understand why it's so important and possibly find funding to help preserve these great places. So Brent Legs, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Now, I'm just gonna start off the bat with the most obvious question. Why is it so important to save Black spaces?
So I think I want to start by telling you my personal story and how I came to historic preservation. So I have the good fortune of celebrating my 20th anniversary in August of this year at the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I'm based in DC, but thank you. I'm based in DC, but my hometown is Paducah, Kentucky. Anybody heard of the little town of Paducah?
Yep.
Yeah. I bring this up to set the context because my very first memory of race, place, and identity happened when I was in the 4th grade. I've got a twin brother, and my mother, as a professional development exercise, had us to introduce ourselves when we were enrolling in school. And I said, hello, my name is Brent Legs, and the administrator said, what's your address? And I said, 741 McGuire Avenue. And she said, what apartment number? And I said, 741. And she said, no, what apartment number? And I look up at my mother and I see she's getting agitated. And on the car ride home, realized that she thought we lived way at the other end of the street in low-income housing. But my parents in 1972 constructed a red brick ranch home that they were very proud of, and that we lived in a well-established middle-class Black community. And I bring this up to say that as I look back over my career and journey, moments like this demonstrate that we need to facilitate the unlearning that needs to happen so that we can mitigate racial bias, that we can, in essence, help Americans to be witness to Black humanity. And I feel inspired to be able to use the tools of preservation to partner with communities to be able to honor our ancestors, the overlooked history and contribution that our ancestors have made to American history, and to demonstrate that preservation revitalizes communities. it creates a more representative, commemorative landscape that validates the contributions of all Americans. It supports a healthy environment and reduces our carbon footprint. So it's a kind of long-winded way of saying that preservation has so much value in society, and it takes folks like us to be able to make the case for support and recognition.
I agree. We are the ones who are, I guess, kind of assigned to be gatekeepers, if you will, of our history. And if we don't do what we need to do now, it's going to be even harder for the next generation. So thank you for all that you do with that. Let me ask this question. Let's talk about African American museums. What can they do moving forward to preserve the institutions?
Did anybody recently go to the Association of African American Museums conference in Charleston? It was just last week. They are an almost 50-year institution that has this expansive network of Black museums across the country. And they are analyzing kind of the operational needs, the resource needs. And what I am seeing across the country is Black museums are having a hard time kind of building a case for support, being able to secure the financial resources to sustain their operations. And I would say the challenge with museums is they often have the red velvet rope. It's the one-time visitor. And so it's hard for them to expand their audience when, someone comes, they take a tour, they learn about a site, and that's the last time that they will visit. So a lot of the work is helping museums reimagine their business model and how they can more effectively utilize their historic assets.
And speaking of that, because you've just spoken to some of those disparities as well as the barriers in preservation, what are some of the others with the challenge of trying to keep the institutions going? What would you say is the number one barrier?
Number one, money.
Yeah.
And I put this into the context of anybody that's advocating on behalf of a historic place. The work of historic preservation is perpetual. It never ends, and I don't know that the public understands that we are actively working daily, but over centuries, to protect these historic places, and it requires public and private investment to sustain the maintenance, the programming, staffing, and operations of historic places. And I would say that our industry has not successfully fundraised at scale to create the financial infrastructure that allows us to penetrate the marketplace at scale. And I just want to give you all a statistic that really brings the challenge and the need to life. So the program that I manage, good fortune to lead, is called the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund. It was created in the aftermath of Charlottesville in 2017. And as you heard in the introduction, it's meant to facilitate a broader understanding of American history through the lens of the Black experience and historic places. One of our signature programs is our National Grant Program. Over the last 8 rounds, we have received 6,805 funding proposals requesting $878 million. I am proud to say that just since February of this year, we have invested $13.5 million in 54 grantee projects, and we're at a total of $44 million and 376 grantee projects across the country, but you see the gap. It's a substantial need to be able to resource African American historic places to sustain the cultural legacies.
Okay. Now with that, are there any resources for African American owned museums versus African American exhibit spaces?
Expand on that.
Meaning white-led organizations that tell the Black story and they have a space, just a space for African American history, but it doesn't tie into anything, but they're able to get the grant funding for it, versus an actual African American museum being able to get funding for their entire museum to tell the whole story.
Yeah, so when we developed the Northeast African American Historic Places program in 2008, thankfully, a Connecticut-based funder, the 1772 Foundation, invested $1 million so that we could launch this program over a period of 4 years. And the very first step was to conduct a survey to assess the financial health of organizations interpreting Black history. That included traditional sites that were just interpreting it versus historic sites whose primary mission was to interpret Black history. And what we learned is only 1 out of a data set of 76 had a business plan. Very few had master preservation plans. Very few were fundraising through being informed through a fundraising plan, and that the majority of their earned income was through tours. And in essence, many were raising $10,000 or less. And so you see that they are challenged regardless of being a traditionally led or a Black-led museum. And that's why the ongoing work is to be able to reimagine programming and to be able to reimagine how we utilize historic spaces.
Now, speaking of reimagining how the spaces are being used, let's talk about interpretation. How do you feel about historic places interpreting accurate and complete history, such as the historic spaces like forced work labor camps or the plantations, and places that have been recognized for their architecture or the history of the enslavers who built the property, yet do not talk about the enslaved who built these places? So there's 2 phases. So we'll start with the forced work labor camps. How do you feel about those places being interpreted and telling the whole story?
Yeah. I would just kind of put this into a broader lens. It is our nation's collective responsibility to tell the truth and to reveal the truth through the historic built environment and our commemorative landscape. And partly what I'm motivated by is to flip the script on the way that our nation traditionally understands Black history and to help us move beyond the stereotypical storytelling through the lens of slavery and just the painful aspects, the traumatic aspects,
trauma-based,
right? Or just the glorious moments of the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s. And so the opportunity for expanded interpretation is to highlight the resistance, the protest movement, stories of romantic life and love during the period of slavery. Even the establishment of Black churches out in the forest and the woods, and so much of our institutions were being literally dreamed and manifested during that period of time. One example is through our work at a presidential site called James Madison's Montpelier. Y'all all know James Madison, father of the Constitution. So we have been working over years to bring life to the enslaved workers' story. It first started through archaeology that led to the reconstruction of the slave cabins, that led to, through community engagement, led to the permanent exhibition in the main house called the Mere Distinction of Color. And what was powerful is we wanted not just to tell an agricultural story, but we wanted to connect the contemporary impacts of the legacy of slavery and can make those connections to policing and some of the other social injustices that we see in contemporary life, which was highly innovative. But a milestone moment was our advocacy to increase descendant recognition at the governance level as part of the Board of Trustees, so that we could facilitate structural parity, we could support Black descendants and having a reclamation moment to their ancestral homeland, and create room for their leadership in the governance of a presidential site. And I'm proud to say that the chairman of the Board of Trustees is African American, and there's 50% representation on the board. That's the kind of innovation around sites of difficult histories that we can facilitate with innovation, partnerships, and helping to strengthen the engagement of descendant communities.
Thank you for that. I appreciate you mentioning being able to tell the story not just from a trauma-based lens, because a lot of times when talking about history, when it's talking about Black history, which by the way is American history, it's always from the trauma-based lens. And so I think with the interpreting of sites as well as their spaces, it needs to be from the lens of resiliency and determination. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Now,
I want to expand on that, and I also want to speak to something that you mentioned So our industry in historic preservation and for years has uplifted architectural places for the obvious reason. You know, we can see the beauty in high-style architecture and want to celebrate American designers. That's important. But in many ways, we devalued vernacular spaces that are central to the Black lived experience. And so one of our projects is the childhood home of Nina Simone in Tryon, North Carolina, a 3-room vernacular structure that at first glance is simple and unadorned, and you would have no idea that the voice of the American Civil Rights Movement was born there, or this icon in music had her start there. And our stewardship approach is that we intervene in advanced preservation planning as if it was Thomas Jefferson's home.
Nice.
And it's exciting that it's currently under restoration, including the landscape. And for us, we are wanting the industry to recognize the lesser recognized value of vernacular architecture.
That's beautiful, because the lesser known stories, and like you said, with Nina's, when you were bringing up Nina Simone, all I heard was, goddamn Mississippi, and that's what came to mind. But just imagining her as a little girl growing up, and to know that she would be the voice of song for the civil rights movement. So that is very important that you mentioned the vernacular spaces, because they are important. There's so many different avenues to be able to tell, but again, oftentimes they're left behind. So,
I agree.
Yeah, thank you.
We have the opportunity, and I'm sure you see this all across the state of Connecticut, is how an individual site of significance can facilitate an opportunity for broader neighborhood stewardship and revitalization. And originally, we were just focused on the singular site because we believed that Nina deserved a singular place where her legacy would endure. But today, we are developing a stewardship strategy for her home church. You can literally stand in a bedroom window and see it right down the street, which a space is underutilized and like many Black churches are needing support. The vacant Masonic temple that was built by Black hands that has an opportunity for being used for programmatic space in the cemetery. So we're expanding our engagement there and thinking more holistically about the opportunity for cultural development strategy through a cultural district. So I bring this up to say, as the Freedom Trail expands and grows, I'm curious, in your kind of short time as a community outreach coordinator and liaisoning with the community, I've had 4 meetings since I've been here since yesterday. And Tammy walks in the room and everybody is greeting her with hugs and smiles, and it's clear. And I'm just curious if you have any expansive ideas for being able to scale up revitalization and cultural development.
Well, we call that a trail within a trail, what you just described with Miss Nina Simone. One of the things that I think is real helpful is finding the connective stories. One of the things with the Freedom Trail, with the different sites that are on the trail, a lot of them didn't understand or realize the connection they had to one another. So what I've enjoyed doing is connecting and having those collaborations happen and making it public. We've had panel discussions here about the Amistad, and we've had different sites that have stories that are connected to the story, connected to the Amistad story, actually happened here in this room. And we had the Lieutenant Governor. And so that's one way in which we do it. Then we have just different stories that connect across the state. And so one of my goals that I've started and I hope to continue to expand on is connecting those collaborative stories throughout the state. We do have several things that could be considered trails within trails. One of them is Prince Mortimer. I don't know if you know his story. Prince Mortimer lived to be 110. He was enslaved. He was captured from his homeland brought here to Connecticut at the age of 6. He was promised his freedom on 2 different occasions. At the age of 87, he was accused of trying to murder his enslaver. He was sent to prison, and one of the sites that's on the Freedom Trail is Old Newgate Prison, and he was there from 87 to about 23 years, and altogether enslaved. He gets out, and they gave him his freedom, but at this point, he's an old man. Where is he going? And he makes his way to his town in Middletown, but he doesn't know anybody. So he walks all the way back to Old Newgate, and they let him stay there because he has no home, but he has freedom to go about. Long story short, his story starts in different places. He has a connection in East Granby, Middletown, Weathersfield, and possibly Yale, New Haven. So that in itself is a way to revitalize that story, and it's coming down the state. Yeah. So those are the ways in which I am trying to connect those stories to revitalize the Freedom Trail more, to get it more into the public light, because like I said before, the signs were there. People were aware of the Freedom Trail, but they didn't truly understand what it meant. And so being the outreach director, I have that privilege to be able to go out and talk to people and engage them and get them excited about the history of Connecticut. Get them excited that their descendants were right here and that they were very important people who, if it wasn't for their actions and their dedication, Connecticut probably wouldn't be what it is. But not only Connecticut, the nation. So these stories connect to the nation, and we also have an international story now. So not just the Amistad has been international, we have Prince Abdul Rahman. And so he's, if you get a chance, PBS is called Prince Among Thieves. And his story connects to Center Church because when he's finally able to get his freedom, he does a speaking tour, and he does a speaking tour right here at Center Church. So that's all brought here, and it's all a part of that revitalization. Not many people know those stories. And so that's what I do with trying to help as one aspect of being the outreach director to the community.
Well, I love that. And having started my career in Boston and worked across the Northeast for 9 years, I have a deep appreciation and affinity for Connecticut's history. And I just love historic trails and historic marker programs. It is a low-cost intervention because you can mark space. The public will be curious and can literally interact with history that they would have just walked past if we didn't put a stake in the ground or put a plaque on a building. And one example of the power of trails and marker programs, this young lady walking past a derelict house in Pittsburgh, if it wasn't for that sign that talked about the National Negro Opera Company and Mary Cardwell Dawson being the first African American to start an opera company, and she was inspired to purchase the site. She has now created an organization, and they're actively restoring this space as a center for artistic expression. It's like that's the power of being able to claim space, market, and engage the public with it.
Yeah. Connecticut also has a unique position in that it is one, if not the only state that has a statewide trail. Most places have a spot, like I like to use Boston, 2.5 mile trail. But Connecticut is all over the state. So no matter where you enter the state, you are going to be on the Connecticut Freedom Trail. And that makes it unique, and it puts it in a, that's why I call it the jewel of Connecticut. Because no matter where you enter, you could be on the Freedom Trail and you're learning about this dynamic, vast history that has not been so well known or well told. Connecticut is also ahead in the fact that, and we got to do better, is that Black and Latino history, it's elective. So we got to get it to the point where it's not just elective, that it's actually on the curriculum. And I think that will help to spread the story more of the history and help further with the revitalization as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about interpretations and oral history. How important is oral history to the telling of the story and the establishing of this?
It's highly important. A lot of our community's memory, kind of culture memory, is held in the bodies of our community, and it's crucially important that we kind of mine those stories and we capture those on film and recording. One example of the importance of oral history, when we were advocating to President Biden for the establishment of the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley National Monument, we, through primary source documentation, could make a case to the Department of Interior that the Tallahatchie County Courthouse, where the trial was held, was clear that there's evidence of that moment in history. Robert's Temple Church of God in Christ in Chicago, where his funeral was held in 1955, there was clear evidence of that. But where his body was recovered from the river, it was based on oral history, and it's one of the first examples of the National Park Service and Department of Interior affirming and validating oral history that allowed us to make the case that we needed 3 sites, a cultural landscape site in the Delta, to tell this complete story. And I'm proud to say that Graball Landing is one of the 3 contributing sites across a discontiguous boundary in Chicago and Mississippi to be able to tell that story. So oral history is critically important, and it's something that we should value.
Oh, I agree, 100%. I agree. Let's see. Speaking of oral history, we know that the Black churches played a big role, a very big role. So how important is it that we keep Black churches from going extinct?
So y'all mind if I kind of celebrate the accomplishments of the fund for a moment?
No, go right ahead. It's all about you.
Because I want to put this into an important context. So we have a rock star National Advisory Council. It's co-chaired by Darren Walker, who's the president of the Ford Foundation, and actor and director Ms. Felicia Rashad. Other luminaries include Brian Stevenson, Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr., and others. And Dr. Gates said, when we established our Preserving Black Churches program, that the Black church is the oldest institution in America founded by Black people. That one sentence challenged our team to think differently about how we prioritize the restoration and permanence of institutional sites. So we are organizing a lot of resources. Thanks to our partnership with the Lilly Endowment, we have secured an unprecedented $60 million that's supporting our Preserving Black Churches program, and we partner with 114 to date, 8.5 million in February. For anybody who's connected to a historically Black church in Connecticut, put us on their radar, because we're inviting funding proposals starting August 4th. Go to savingplaces.org. But putting this into a broader context, the Black church has substantial stewardship responsibilities, and we believe that it is unfair that they have to cover the maintenance, the programming, the interpretation solely and independently. And I just want to give you a couple examples. When we learned that 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, one of the most iconic American churches and irreplaceable sites in civil rights, that they were not receiving any state funding from the state of Alabama, when tourism economy is the 5th largest economy in the state, much of that is driven by the civil rights heritage tourism economy, and that, like all Black church, or majority of historically Black churches, they're facing all kinds of threats: aging congregation on limited income, development pressures, deferred maintenance, you could just go on and on. And so we wanted to help them establish their very first preservation endowment. We've invested $500,000, they successfully matched it 1-to-1, and have created a baseline of financial support to cover their cyclical maintenance at $1 million. Or just down the way in Selma, Alabama, we made a special announcement for the 60th anniversary in honor of the Voting Rights Act, that Brown Chapel, which is currently under restoration, $3 million. A couple of years ago, they had John Lewis's funeral there. And thank God that the balconies did not collapse, because they were unaware that there was severe termite damage.
Wow.
Like many churches, they have to make hard decisions about what they can sustain in real time, thus letting insurance lapse, and realizing that they now have this burden and they've got 13 active members.
Wow.
It is one of the most important churches in our country that literally is connected to the march from Montgomery, or Selma to Montgomery. We invested $1 million alongside of 1.5 with the National Park Service. We're actively fundraising to complete the $3 million fundraising campaign, and we are working with them over 2 years to develop a comprehensive stewardship plan that moves them beyond just focusing on short-term preservation goals, but looking holistically at how to steward the site and move beyond its use as just a religious space, and helping them to transition into a thriving historic site that's going to be key to their long-term sustainability. And so I bring this up to say, whether it's historic Black churches, or it's a site like the Museum of African History, Boston, Nantucket, or the Mary and Eliza Freeman houses in Bridgeport, stewardship planning, where you are focused on the preservation goals, how to protect and conserve the assets, the landscape, the buildings, the objects, the artifacts, the cultural component. How do you envision and develop creative programming and interpretation so that the public can have unique educational and cultural experiences? That's the human engagement. And then the third pillar of stewardship is management. It's the business of preservation. And if you are not advancing all of these concurrently, you are going to have a hard time in being relevant to the public and sustaining the public's interest in your story.
And speaking of, let's go back a step to oral tradition or oral history. Are there difficulties in recording the African American history or in African American spaces? And does this recording of the history fit into the current framework of history?
When we created the Action Fund, our goal was to demonstrate that preservation had a higher purpose in society. And what I mean by that, not only did we want to expand the American story, but we wanted to reconstruct national identity. If we could begin to shift human behavior, that we could use historic places to facilitate truth, racial reconciliation, and healing. And the second goal was to present examples to role models that are often absent in our community to inspire our youth that they can reach their highest potential. So these stories are crucial for being able to advance a higher purpose. And again, whether it's oral history, whether it's expanded interpretation, whether it's a collection and portfolio of sites, it's important that we are intentional about the stories that we are telling and the reason behind it.
I agree 100%. It is definitely needed. Now, we've been talking about preservation, we've been talking about the access to funding, and for an everyday average person, how can they get involved in preservation work? What's the necessary steps besides having the desire to want to do it?
Yeah, I think the starting point is being curious. So I grew up in Paducah and went to Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church. And I remember seeing right down the street this 2-story white home, looked like it needed, to be painted and needed a little love. Years later, I would learn that this was one of the earliest kind of Airbnb models, that 2 Black women in 1909 opened their house as entrepreneurs and had a short-term rental business, and it was a site listed in the Green Book.
Nice.
And it was right in my plain view every single Wednesday night, Sunday morning. And so I share that example is that we've got to be curious. Yeah. Like curious about our neighborhood, just curious about the block. And that curiosity hopefully will lead to discovery and public education. And then just to be able to volunteer, whether it's a cleanup opportunity at a cemetery or volunteering your talent and resources on a board, or making a $10 a month donation to a historic site that you think has a lot of potential. There are a lot of ways that we can contribute to the broader work of stewardship. And more than anything else, I want folks here and our audience to understand that the work of preserving Connecticut's stories, its full history, is a collective responsibility. It's not just those that are leading the nonprofit organizations or the churches. It's all of our responsibility to see ourselves as caretakers of a history that's important.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so very much for that. Before we close, there's one final question, then we'll turn it over to you. How has the current administration impacted the work that you are doing?
I thought we might get through this without it. Of course, that would be asked. It's clear that we have to acknowledge the harmful impacts that the primary institution responsible for the stewardship of our cultural landscapes and our natural resources is divesting from their responsibility. And it is having an unanticipated impact on preservation philanthropy, just on the morale of, I've had so many conversations with folks that are discouraged, that are feeling attacked, that are questioning why would our federal government devalue, intentionally work to undermine and even devalue 4 centuries of American history. So what we are doing in this moment is just amplifying that you have an alternative, that we can build support around an alternative that's called the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund, that is working at a national scale, that has raised $150 million to date. We've established $16 million in endowments. We are looking to be the national platform that will sustain this movement in perpetuity, and with everyone's help and support, we can think more audaciously about what the private market can do to sustain this work. So I'm inspired that in a moment of crisis is an opportunity to dream bigger, to do more, and to demonstrate that we can sustain this work.
I also think it's the opportunity for philanthropists to step up. I think it's an opportunity, like you said, it's an opportunity to dream, but I also think it's an opportunity for the philanthropists who wants to support, and now is their time to actually step up to the plate to do so now that the federal government is backing off. So, and that I think will help organizations have a more diverse way of being sustained and being supported, and like you said, taking it in perpetuity. All right, everyone, we are going to turn it over to you. Please, Michael has a free handheld mic. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and he will come over to you. Or comments, it doesn't have to be questions. Any questions or comments that you've heard about today, please feel free. And that's also in social media land as well. All right.
Hi, good afternoon. To that last point that you all were talking about in terms of sustainability and having dreams, having hopes, and so forth, moving forward, right? So I have a similar thought, is that everyone in here that have venues, everyone in here that has some sort of landmark, right? I look at that, I take it to a bigger picture, especially where this administration has influenced a lot of how we are going to receive sustainability and funding. So I look at this as even my own spot, which is a museum. I look at this as being a ship, a vessel in the middle of the ocean right now, right? We're all in the middle of an ocean. We have no motor, we have no wind, sail, or anything. And so what we have to continue to do, have a plan, as you said, have a plan, have something set forward, because at the end of this 3 years or 3.5 years that this administration, we hope, will be out of here, right? One of the things that we're going to have to look at is our institutions, our educational institutions, our civic institutions, and those places like that are going to be in need of some type of cultural infusion, some sort of reawakening. So we have to keep our eye on the prize, so to speak, in terms of making sure that we don't deviate from what we've been doing and moving forward. So I agree that we have to keep this momentum going, and we have to keep planning, and we have to be doing programming right now, because now is that point where we have the time because of what's going on around us. So I concur that we need to keep our eye on the prize and keep this thing going, and everybody help each other, as Tammy and Todd and the Connecticut Freedom Trail staff has been doing, because I'm encouraged. I am not feeling any low at this, and folks are saying, how are you going to sustain? I'm concerned, but you know what? I'm planning, I'm programming, and I'm going to keep this thing going and make sure that at the end of the day, it will be sustainable, but it also will be a valuable tool for our communities.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Yes, ma'am. Wait for the mic, please.
So thank you. It's my very wise voice. Thank you so much, Brent, for coming back home to us and reminding us that we have the tools that we need to do what we need to do. We just have to know where to get them. A couple of things came across my mind that I had a question about. One of which is my mom here in Plainville is the curator of the African American history, and we have an Amy Zine Church in Plainville, but my mother has a complete museum in her basement that she built in her house, and I'm just wondering, because she's 88 and that means that she's seasoning, is how do, and I know that's not a real answer, so I'm just sort of laying it out here. We need to be able to lean into how we can take that museum out of the basement and make it accessible to the public. The other thing, the other question I have that doesn't require an answer right now too is that Harriet Tubman gave the Amy Zine Church property in Massachusetts, was a camp barber, but there, what?
In New York?
In New York?
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm not sure what they've done with that. We've had some, and even in our church in town, by poor management, our history had been thrown in a dumpster and not utilizing some of the things that could have benefited from us. So we need to rebuild that. Like you're talking to us makes me encouraged that we can rebuild that. But also, I'm very motivated in making sure that that story stays alive, that that property remains useful for in Plainville and the connections with that church.
Thank you for sharing that. And first, I just want to say, Grandma, you're looking beautiful and lovely at 88 years old. Just
Yes, take your bow. Take your bow, ma'am.
And I just want to acknowledge that we are intentional about recognizing our elders now and giving them their flowers now. And so thank you for your stewardship of Black history and American history. We celebrate you. And then I appreciate that you all are being proactive in stewardship. This is critically important. And I want you to think about estate planning. So it sounds like you don't envision the home being a space for public access and interpretation and programming.
It has the capacity to do that.
Okay.
We have the capacity to do that.
Because I could imagine, depending on the direction, and you might explore multiple opportunities for stewardship. So one could be what might happen in the home and what are the financial implications of that as a stewardship strategy. And also, what are the spatial limitations for being able to engage the public at that space, and some other considerations. It sounds like the opportunity is to find an existing institutional partner that can share the information with the public and manage it over time, I would start with documenting what exists and having a digital database of everything, all of the papers, all of the artifacts. You probably could partner with an academic institution and some folks that would be able to help you move through that process, but that's the first step, is to understand fully what the collection is.
We actually did that.
Oh, that's
We had
awesome.
Someone that came and did sorry. We actually did that.
Okay.
So we do have that organized, right? Carly came and got
That's perfect.
support from her institution.
Okay.
So we really need the steps, like all of the things that we need to know to be able to be strategic in terms of being able to leverage it. And we're in proximity of the Amy Zine Church in town. Our family is part of establishing that. So there is some idea to be able to partner, particularly in order to also preserve that institution and how much value it has to the community.
Well, as you are exploring opportunities, you just want to be diligent about finding the right partner who, both through a legal agreement, is going to make sure that they invest in the conservation, appropriate best practices, conservation of the material culture, and that they are committed to making it available to the public. And so the institutional partner is going to be key here. Before we end, do you have something?
For 17 years, I had a program on public access, which was interviewing African Americans in our New Britain, Hartford, Bristol, in the area. And like out in our area, it's mostly white. So like we don't really exist there. I mean, nobody knows that we ever did anything. And I have all of this on film, but then maybe public access owns it, I don't know, but I have copies of every single program I did. And I had thought that, and a lot of Freedom Trail stuff, because I used to videotape every for 17 years. Anything the Freedom Trail did, I was there with my
That's
my
amazing.
video camera. So I have a lot of that I would think you guys should have, because it's about the people in the areas in Connecticut where nobody thinks anybody was doing anything, and I have that, and I think it should not be in my personal basement. I think it should be where it can really be accessed for the future.
I have the perfect place for it. The Connecticut Freedom Trail has a vault of all of this stuff, but another secondary site would be right here at the old State House. They are working on an exhibit that showcases things throughout Connecticut and the Freedom Trail. And so that would actually be you can talk to Michael afterwards, that would be a great place to exhibit, because what Michael has created is an exhibit, I don't want to say exposing, but shining the spotlight on Freedom Trail sites. And so to have that as part of the oral tradition part of it would be really great. And when it's not being utilized here, we do have a Connecticut Freedom Trail vault, right? And where everything that I collect and everything that everyone has collected, Mr. Narcissus, who was an important part of the Freedom Trail in the early days, he has this beautiful collection of recorded things that we have in the vault that can also be a part of that as well. So thank you for offering that. I really appreciate that. Oh, we have a couple more questions. We'll start here, and then we'll go over here. So you can just pass the mic back.
Thank you for coming today. Appreciate that. One of the things you mentioned in your talk was that museums are having a hard time getting folks to return to visit. So it sounds like developing an audience kind of situation. I know you all are raising money and giving funds out. Is one of the services you offer creative ways for people to develop audiences?
It is, and it's part of our comprehensive stewardship. So we are partnering currently with 19 multi-year preservation projects across the country, from LA to North Carolina. And that's one of the components as part of the culture piece, is understanding audience, existing and prospective audiences. But I want to put this into a broader context. In 2012, I wrote Preserving African American Historic Places, 24-page primer. It was meant to highlight case studies for newcomers to preservation. I made the recommendation that you do not create a new house museum unless the site is a National Historic Landmark and has an authentic collections. Has anybody been to the Louis Armstrong House Museum in Queens, New York?
Not yet.
All right, you all gotta go. Because it's like literally he went down the street to Starbucks. It's authentic, Jetson-like modern kitchen. I mean, it's just the coolest place. But it has so much material culture and authenticity. The majority of African historic places don't have artifacts. You don't want to manipulate and confuse the visitor through a recreation. And so our strategy with Nina Simone was not to create a house museum, but to create a historic site. And so if you aren't a National Historic Landmark, have the authentic collections, then we are encouraging folks to see themselves as a historic site, a place with interpretation and public programming. And you create the flexibility of how you can use the site that then gives you opportunity for expanded audiences and creative development.
Can you say specifically what you mean by creating a specific audience based on all of what you just said? How do I get people to come back?
I will just say simply that oftentimes we are looking to attract a national audience because everybody thinks their site is the first of XYZ, or my history is the most important history that was ever happened. And they often forget that collective memory is a strategy for audience development. And what I mean is, just start with your neighborhood. You need the people that live around the site to have a sense of connection and ownership to it. Start at the city scale. Start at the state, regional, and develop your audiences that way, because that's who's going to sustain and actually attend the programs.
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. I just want to say that when I spoke to you out there, you had said that you hope that we leave inspired, and you succeeded with that. But I also do have a question. It's kind of like a multi-layered question. So thankfully, I have a teenage 18-year-old son who is a history buff, enjoys museums, and we're constantly looking for different adventures and different things to learn throughout Connecticut. Mm-hmm. However, my question with that is, we're living now in a society where a lot of the youth, obviously, they're going to be our future leaders. How do we work on getting them attracted and engaged? And also, part of that question is, I know one of the big issues that you kept discussing was money. Mm-hmm. And obviously, that's an issue just about everywhere. Yeah. Have you or anyone considered, being that we live now in a social media, electronic society, using features such as QR codes that people can scan as they're driving past these monuments and can look up later, or social media platforms and monetizing them? Because I know, especially for my son, the way he finds different locations is seeing something on social media and being like, oh, we should go check this out. Yeah. And I know that with storytelling and with a lot of these locations, you may not be able to attract the people to come in person, but you may be able to have them come on a social media aspect or a YouTube aspect and monetizing that as well.
So you are reading the blueprint for our strategic framework. So my team has been advising that I and then the fund is on social, and we've just started over the last 10 months. And the public is receiving the ideas, and they're learning about historic sites from the places that we're amplifying. So you are spot on. We are just launching a YouTube platform, and I hope over time that this grows into something that we can monetize, where we can reinvest back into our national grant program and grow our direct investments. Putting this into the context of youth engagement. So we are in the early stages of developing a national database and mapping project, and we want to understand holistically all extant African American historic places with a lot of data overlay. And I believe that this is going to be a creative, engaging platform for the youth. And then we are intentional because there are technical gaps. There are a handful of preservation architects that are Black in America that we want to help. They should be helping us to preserve these historic places. So through our engagement with the 7 HBCUs that have schools of architecture, we are creating a pipeline. So we have a strategy that is HBCU student engagement. We have a fellowships program. We've got an internship program at the National Trust more broadly. And so when your son is in college and if he is still interested, I hope he can reach out.
It just started.
Yes, oh yeah, go ahead.
And then before you all have a statewide leader, an unsung hero in Todd. And not only has he led the Freedom Trail for decades and been committed to diversity and telling Connecticut's full story, he is an architectural historian from SCAD. You got this walking technical scholar and somebody who cares deeply about the future generation. So feel free to engage Todd and pick his brain and utilize him as an invaluable resource.
I just want to say thank you to both of you for speaking, and giving us such insight and sharing some of your wisdom with us. So you spoke earlier about the importance of the oral representation, the oral presentation part of this. And with all the different cultures that are, out here and that are looking to, have some insight as well, are there any technical programs out there that are helping to encourage people to record their presentations throughout the museums and the establishments in different languages? Is that something, Jeffrey and I have been actually looking into that, and that's something that we'd like to delve deeper into and to spread awareness that that is an option now, to be able to record your voice as you would walking through the tour and have it come out in different languages. And can you speak more on that?
Yeah, so there are some historic sites that are advancing that work. They understand that it's part of their responsibility to create an inclusive heritage environment, whether it's ADA accessibility or through bilingual languages. And the Association of African American Museums would be your best resource for identifying some sites that have actually prototyped that work and that can share some lessons learned in integrating bilingual language in their exhibition design. But there are some folks that are on the kind of cutting edge of that. And it's critically important to create, like a welcoming space for our Latino brothers and sisters and others that with, again, going back to the big goal, is that our nation understands Black history as American history and that everyone can see themselves in it. So we got to ensure that we're creating those kinds of environments.
Yes, and as it's so important, as we are the only African American History Museum in Connecticut, the Ruby and Calvin Fletcher Museum, we need to be able to spread awareness, not just to our own people, to everyone. And there are other people that may be interested that might not feel comfortable because they might not have the same capabilities and language barriers and such things. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, thank you for that.
We have one more.
Thank you for your comments, and it was great to have this panel today. I want to follow up a little bit more on the digital and social media aspect of things, again, your son and kind of that demographic to reach that. My group created a 15-minute documentary film entitled The 29th Connecticut that really chronicles the story of that regiment and the bravery of the soldiers that fought in there. Love to kind of connect with you in regards to your YouTube channel to have that featured.
Okay.
But also just kind of thinking about how do we get more people interested in the story and interested in how to learn more about that, we do also have a site. Our film is being showed at our site in Berlin, Connecticut, but also just trying to figure out how do we draw a larger and national-based audience based upon that.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think short documentary films that's telling the truth of a historic site are underutilized, and it is such a visually engaging and creative way to engage the public in site history. So yeah, let's talk.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. But before we leave, I need to thank a few people because there was a few moving parts to get this program put together. I want to thank Sally Whipple and the Old State House for letting us be able to do this here at the historic courtroom. I want to thank all of you for coming out, for supporting it live. Thank you, CPAN, for recording and making sure it was being shown at the Legislative Office. Thank you so very much at the State Capitol. But I also want to thank Todd Levine. It's because of his friendship with Brent Legs that we were able to get Mr. Legs here today. So thank all of you for being a part of the moving machine to make this special event happen today, because we only normally do one conversation at noon, but we had 2 conversations at noon this month, and that's why it was so very special, and y'all played a part in it. So thank y'all so much. To everyone in social media land, thank you so very much for joining us. As always, it is the 4th Tuesday of each month at noon where we have special conversations. Next month, we will have a special revisiting conversation that will start for September and October, so please join us for that conversation. As always, please let us know how we are doing. Take our survey. And again, thank you so very much for supporting the program. You are appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
You are welcome, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.